Hello friends, welcome to Squared Plans. I'm Stephanie and today we're going to be setting up the month of October in my faith bullet journal. And I've got this pencil and eraser here ready to go, as well as this Jelly Roll whiteout pen, some black washi tape, this brush pen from Tombow for smaller brushing, and all of these Tombow dual tip brush pens for color and variety. Oh, and one more, I have a Pigma Micron fine liner as well. Okay, so as you can see, I've already penciled in this month's theme. I had taken a bit of a hiatus the last 3 months. Started with me getting COVID over the summer and then just kind of spiraled into a couple of extra months of time just so I didn't have to do as much work and kind of play a little bit of catch up with some of the things I needed to get done. But it's October, it's the last quarter of the year, and I'm ready to do a little bit more in my faith planner again, get more focused in on my spiritual life. So I decided to do for October a pumpkin theme. I thought that would be a really perfect seasonal theme for the month of October. So I have drawn in a few pumpkins, just kind of freehanded them, and also found a verse that sort of relates to, pumpkins and more about harvesting and those kind of things. Just something related, not perfectly about pumpkins, but you get the idea. So I've put in that verse, and for the brush, hand lettered areas, I used my Tombow Fudenosuke brush pen. I use that pretty regularly for my lettering. It's really great for small lettering. It is the hard tip Fudenosuke in black. So I have that done, and then I just used my Pigma Micron, and I think I used a 0.5 or 0.5 tip pen this month, and I really like that. That was, a nice bold, but not too bold fine liner that I'll be using throughout this as well. And for the majority of the decor, what I'm going to be doing is drawing in pumpkins using various Tombow dual tip brush pens. I have a variety of orange tones that I'll be using, as well as a few in some more like olive colored greens. The lighter olive green will be used for a few of the pumpkins, but mainly the darker one will be more for accents and for the stems of the pumpkin. I'm just drawing them in the places where I penciled them in, and I'm I'm working out which colors I want to use where. I find pumpkins to be pretty easy to draw. If you are a little bit intimidated by drawing your own spreads, pumpkins are really an easy one to get started with. You basically just draw an oval in the center and then kind of C shapes on the sides of it to create the other ridges of the pumpkin. So you can start off with either 3 or 5, depending on how big your pumpkin is going to be, and then you just create a few little bumps in the back to, kind of denote that there's more back there if that's how you want to angle the pumpkin. Or you don't have to. Like on the top one, I really don't have any back ridges on the pumpkin, so it's pretty easy to create a simple pumpkin. And as you can see, I've already put in most of the styling and am now trying to put in more shading. I'm just layering over different shades of darker tones of the orange. So if it was like a lighter orange, I'm pulling in some of the deeper oranges to add some shadows and some darkness to kind of define the pumpkins a bit. This was just trial and error too, you guys. I didn't really practice this before I got started. I just was like, okay, let's see what we can make happen and what seems to work best. I just tried different things. I even tried layering over some of the darker green in some areas, which you'll see that top pumpkin with more of the yellow tint in the back and the green all around, kind of going for a squash style look on that, but I don't know. I just did whatever was feeling okay at the time and kind of figured it out as I went along, what seemed to work best. I did overwork these a little bit too, with the shading, putting a little bit of darkness at the bottom, kind of working it into the color already in there. So it looked good, but when I flipped the page, there was definitely some bleed through. More ghosting than bleed through, but there was a little bit of bleed through in some areas. So you just got to be careful not to get too heavy handed like I did here with the layers of Tombow brush pens. One thing to think about too is that I'm using Happy Planner grid paper. So their paper's pretty good. You know, I think it's like maybe a 110 GSM. My standard paper that I print on is about 120 GSM, so it would have probably done a little bit better than the Happy Planner paper if I had just used printed paper, but I have all this grid paper that I wanted to use up this year, and that's why I'm using the Happy Planner stash I already have. So I've gotten all the shading in, and I wanted to finish that out with black tape with white lettering on top to denote the month. That has been the theme that I've carried throughout the year in my faith planner, that black tape kind of header look with the white overlay of the Jelly Roll pen there on top of it for headers. So I use that in every month and then change out the theme depending on how I'm feeling for that month. So we've moved on to the third page of my setup, which is going to be the takeaway again this month. Because I took a break, I really haven't been paying attention that closely to my daily reading. I listen to it every morning. I just like to play it while I'm doing other things, which is good and it's bad. It's good to have it there, of course, to listen to, but I feel like I'm not getting 100% of, you know, the knowledge that's there because I'm distracted by doing other things. So the takeaway I started back in spring, just to summarize quickly what I had read, kind of makes me pay attention a little bit better to what I'm listening to. So that's what we're going to do again on this third page of the spread. I've also already drawn in another pumpkin, and I'm doing some more shading, and I saw on the front page that it needed a little bit more shading there on that top pumpkin, so I went ahead and did that. And that's what I saw. I was like, ooh, yeah, that's, you know, borderline bleed through there. So just got to be extra careful with the layering of the pens. Make sure that you're not saturating the paper too heavily. So I've drawn some horizontal lines across the page for the takeaway. I'll just do a one-line sentence summarizing what I can apply from the reading to my day. That's really what I've been doing with the takeaway. And that works really good. So I'm just putting in the header now with the black tape again and the white ink overlay. And we're going to call that page good. I have labeled it for one for each day, so it goes from 1 to 31 in case you can't see that. Now I'm going to go ahead and start on page 2, which I was holding off on until the ink on the washi tape on the front dried out. And I'm just erasing all the pencil lines so I can get started with drawing in the boxes for my prayer list. I like to do my prayer lists in categories. I like to section them so that it's easy for me to remember when I'm away from this page. Also, too, it just kind of helps me define different groups of people to pray for, mostly outside myself. And, you know, everybody usually prays for their family and friends, but I have one other group there called people, and that one I use for more global type prayers for people out of my sphere of influence, but you know, may be in need of prayer. So I've just penciled in some boxes here, so I'm just outlining them now in the black. Again, using my Pigma fine liner for that. And then I'm going to add a little bit of color here on these, just putting a little corner marker there, a little corner edge in orange to tie in the color scheme for the month. I also, as you can see, hand wrote in the names of each of the categories just as part of the box, and I think that turned out pretty good. And of course add in a pumpkin or two here on this page as well, carrying through that theme. Just going to hand draw them in really quick. I'm going back and forth, playing around with different colors and mixing, shades of that green with the orange and different oranges together, seeing what I can create with those. With orange being the main color, I could get away with a lot. I didn't want it to be overly green, so green is more of an accent or a shade color versus a true color as part of the theme. Orange is really the dominant color here. That will probably be what I'll stick with for the weeklies. I'll find a twi marker in my stash that's a good shade of orange to match up with this kind of warm pumpkin orange, and use that for my daily lettering, which is how I use the weeklies in this planner. And finally, I will put in the header for this. It'll just say prayer list. I'm just going to beef up the letters a little bit on this page. And again, that'll need to dry, so we'll let that sit, and I'll do some more erasing, kind of clean up the pencil marks I left around. And okay, I think we're ready to move on to the weekly page. So I'll get started drawing out the boxes there. For this first week, I decided to go with something fairly familiar, which is more of a quadrant style layout. I'm going to go ahead and box in this week's lettering area. I'm creating boxes, 4 boxes per page with a little bit of a gap between them. And then I'll go ahead and write in the days of the week. I'll have the week go across the spread, so we'll start with Monday, Tuesday, and then Wednesday, Thursday we'll carry on to this following page. And normally I put the empty box at the top of the spread where the Monday box is, but I decided to try something a little different with this one and put it at the back, mainly because I wanted the pumpkins to be sitting on the bottom of the page, so I thought that that would be a good way to make that happen without really disturbing the look and feel of the spread. So I'm just going to finish erasing the extra pencil lines, and then I'm going to use my white out pen to just go through and try to hide some of the ghosting and bleed through that came through on the back of the pages, to kind of clean things up a little bit, make it a little bit neater. And again, I want to add a little bit of color to these boxes, so I'm going to start with adding in those little corner markers. I tend to like to carry certain elements throughout the month, so these corner markers you'll probably see on most of my spreads once I'm all done. I usually only set up the very first week, and then I will do the rest of the weeks as they come. So you can see how it all turns out at the end of the month in my flip through videos. That's where I really showcase, all of my planners after the pen, how they came out for the month. But yeah, so you'll probably see those elements repeated over and over again throughout the month in my spreads. And now I am putting in some shading here on the boxes as well, using a slightly darker, almost browner orange that I have in my stash. I'm really not good at this, you guys. As you can see, my hand is not steady. I was trying to find the angle that really made the best, straight lines and even lines, but I'm just not that good at drawing straight lines on the page, especially with these brush tip pens. That's what makes it a little bit more difficult, is the angle of the brush really makes it a little bit rougher. So I'm going back through and trying to clean up the ones that really didn't come out that well. And then I'm going to add in a little bit of bonus color there, just underlining the day of the week. And finally, I will get this area down here at the bottom set up with the decor. Again, just kind of drawing in those pumpkins. One thing, if you guys are doing this for the first time, especially with brush pens or anything that's more of a highlighter type pen, where overlaying the color on top of each other will make it darker, be sure that you go in the direction you want the lines to be. So, like for example, drawing that squash, I'm going from a top to bottom in a curved, sweep as I color in the squash. And that's just so that it looks like it's deliberate, and I'm trying not to overlap as much unless it's purposeful to make more shadowing or more definition in a certain area. Also kind of adding in some green here on this squash, trying to make it look a little bit more squashy. I don't know how I did on those, but the rest I felt were pretty good. The pumpkins came out pretty good. Once I got kind of comfortable drawing the pumpkins, I started to vary how I drew them. So this one, I didn't start off with a center pumpkin oval, but I did two. So it was like a different angle of the pumpkin. And that was kind of fun. That was just, a way to vary how you're looking at the pumpkin per se. And how I drew in the shadowing also varied. Sometimes I would use the brush pen, sometimes I would use the finer tip pen on the other side and then draw it in. I'd also overlay more of the same color on top of each other to kind of help blend it into the, color there already for the pumpkin. Again, it was a lot of trial and error. I didn't really find a technique that I was like, this is the technique. It just really depended on the colors that I had and how heavy-handed I was with the ink itself. So try it out, see what works best for you, and kind of find your own groove. But I show you different ways that I went about it, and so hopefully that'll help you figure out what works best for you. So finally, we're going to skip to the very last page, the monthly overview page. And I put that down a little bit too fast, not giving the title time to dry there on the washi tape. So I just went back and cleaned that up. So for the monthly, I've been doing all year just a summary of the verses I read each day in my daily reading. It's not really anything more than an archive of what I've read, but it is kind of nice to see like what books I was going through in what months. It's a little bit hard to do in the app that I use, which is called YouVersion Bible app. Say I wanted to know what I did in May, to go back and see what I was reading in May would be a little bit of a chore in the app. So it's just nice to have it there on the page. I'm just going to use some orange headers to define the days, and at the top I will go ahead and do more of that black tape title situation with the white overlay and just say what I read this month. Started to go a little bit off there, or askew on the lettering, so I fixed that with a quick rub off of the ink, and then I went back through and used my black fine liner just to kind of clean up any excess white overlay smudge, and that worked really well. So finally, I'll pull in more pumpkins down here at the bottom. Again, just kind of finish out the decor on this page, tie everything together. And I did call an audible here on this pumpkin and decided to do a little bit more green. Just wanted to have a little bit of greenery on here. But then as you can see, I used that dark orange to tie it in a little bit more with the oranges so that the green wasn't so prominent. And I'll go back through and finish up some of the shadowing here on these other pumpkins that I've already drawn in. Again, like I said, I didn't really find a technique that was like, this is the technique, but I tended to do, a fairly darker shadow on the bottom and then a middle tone or the same tone as the pumpkin overlaid, so it got a little bit darker there going up into the middle section of each pumpkin, and then the top I usually left fairly bare. That was pretty standard. And then I just drew in the stems with the darker green and a few twisty viney looking things for a little extra something. And then some of the pumpkins felt like they needed a little more definition, so we'll add that in. A little bit more shadowing. I went back and cleaned up the title and all the pencils, and that will do it, friends. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up down below. Also too, go ahead and leave me a comment if you'd like to get in touch, and think about subscribing to my channel if you haven't already, if you'd like to see more of my videos. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and we will see you next time. Bye!